The Burning Tower. The 67th floor of Wayne Enterprises burned with the particular hunger that only comes from phosphorus and malice. Through the smoke-choked corridors, Harley Quinn moved like a carnival ghost, her pigtails singed at the tips, leaving tiny wisps of blonde hair floating in the superheated air like dandelion seeds in hell. She should have been afraid. Anyone with half a brain cell, and Harley had exactly 3.5 on good days, should have been terrified of the inferno that Garfield Lynns had crafted with his twisted artistry. But as another explosion rocked the building's steel skeleton, sending a symphony of shattering glass cascading into the Gotham night, Harley found herself grinning. "Oh, Mistah J would have loved this," she whispered to herself, pressing her back against a wall that radiated heat like a furnace door. The paint was beginning to bubble and curl, revealing the drywall beneath like diseased skin peeling away from bone. The building groaned around her, a wounded leviathan of concrete and steel, its death throes echoing through the elevator shafts and stairwells. Somewhere above her, Firefly waited. She could feel his presence like a fever dream, hot and delirious and wrong in ways that made her skin crawl beneath her red and black diamond-patterned costume. Harley had faced plenty of pyromaniacs in her time. Most of them were simple creatures, driven by base impulses to watch the world burn. But Lynns was different. He was an artist of annihilation, a conductor orchestrating symphonies of destruction with the patience of a spider spinning its web. The very air around him seemed to whisper promises of beautiful, terrible things. She crept forward, her boots crunching on broken glass that had been transformed into a carpet of diamonds by the dancing flames. The heat was becoming unbearable now, each breath searing her lungs like she was swallowing molten copper. Her makeup, so carefully applied that morning, was beginning to run in colorful rivulets down her cheeks, a melting clown mask revealing the determined woman beneath. "I know you're there, little jester," came a voice from the darkness ahead, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "I can smell your fear beneath all that smoke." Harley paused, tilting her head like a curious bird. "Fear? Honey, you've got me confused with someone who's got enough sense to be scared. I'm the gal who French-kissed a crocodile and asked for seconds." A laugh echoed through the burning corridors, not the wild, unhinged cackle she was known for, but something else entirely. Something that sounded like the whisper of flames consuming dry timber, like the sigh of a house settling into its own grave. Bravado, Firefly's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, carried by the smoke and heat currents. "I've heard it before, from heroes and villains alike. They all sound the same when the flames finally kiss their skin." The temperature spiked suddenly, and Harley threw herself sideways just as a gout of liquid fire erupted from a concealed nozzle in the wall. The chemical flame hit the spot where she'd been standing, instantly transforming the corporate carpet into a miniature lake of hell. The smell of burning synthetic fibers filled her nostrils, acrid, choking, wrong. "Close," she called out, pulling herself up and brushing sparks from her costume. "But ya missed the part where I'm not like the others' sweetness. See, most folks got survival instincts. Me, I had mine surgically removed along with my good sense and my concern for proper nutrition." She could hear him moving now, the soft whisper of his flamethrower's pilot light, the gentle hiss of pressurized chemicals waiting to be unleashed. Firefly moved through his domain like a priest through a cathedral, every step calculated, every breath a prayer to the god of combustion. The building shuddered again, and somewhere far below Harley heard the distant wail of fire trucks. Too little, too late. By the time they could get their ladders high enough to matter, this tower would be nothing but a glowing skeleton against the Gotham skyline, a monument to one man's obsession with beautiful destruction. "Tell me something, Firefly," she called out, her voice echoing strangely in the superheated air. "What's the point of all this? I mean, sure, big boom, pretty flames, very artistic and all that jazz. But what's your endgame here, sugar? Endgame." The voice was closer now, just around the next corner. "You think in such linear terms, Quinn. This isn't about endings, it's about transformation, about revealing the truth that lies beneath all our carefully constructed facades." Harley peeked around the corner and immediately jerked her head back as another stream of fire painted the wall where her face had been. The heat was so intense that her eyebrows felt crispy, and she was pretty sure her left pigtail was smoking. "Truth, huh? And what truth would that be exactly? That we are all just fuel for the fire," Firefly said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Some burn bright and quick like paper and gasoline. Others smolder slowly like green wood, but in the end we all return to ash. I simply accelerate the process." The philosophical pyromaniac routine was getting old fast. Harley had heard variations of this speech from half the costumed nutjobs in Arkham. It was always the same. Some grand justification for why they needed to hurt people, some cosmic truth that only they could see. as if setting things on fire required a doctorate in metaphysics. She pulled out her oversized mallet, its cartoon-like proportions absurd in the face of such genuine menace. The rubber grip was getting slippery with sweat, and the heat was making the metal head expand just enough to throw off its balance. But it was still her weapon, still an extension of her will, and she'd be damned if she let a jumped-up arsonist with a god complex make her feel small. "You know what I think," she said, stepping boldly around the corner. "I think you're just another sad little man with a sad little obsession. And all this pretty talk about transformation and truth is just ya trying to convince yourself that you're something more than a walking disaster." Firefly stood at the far end of the corridor, his form wreathed in heat distortion like a desert mirage. His fireproof suit was a work of art in its own right, sleek, functional, beautiful in the way that deadly things often were. The flamethrower in his hands looked almost organic, as if it had grown from his body rather than being strapped to it. "Harsh words," he said, raising the weapon, "but then the truth often burns." The stream of fire that erupted from his weapon was unlike anything Harley had ever seen. It wasn't the wild, chaotic flame of a common torch or Molotov cocktail. This was liquid death, controlled and precise, a river of destruction that moved with its own terrible intelligence. She rolled, came up running. The fire followed her like a living thing, seeking, hunting, consuming everything in its path behind her, the corporate motivational posters, teamwork and dedication and excellence. Curled and blackened, their hollow slogans feeding the flames that devoured them. "The thing about fire," Firefly called out as he advanced, laying down another controlled burst that forced Harley to vault over a reception desk, "is that it's honest. It doesn't lie, doesn't pretend to be something it's not. It simply consumes, and in consuming it reveals truth." Harley's boots skidded on the polished floor as she rounded another corner, her mallet clutched tight in both hands. The heat was everywhere now, pressing against her from all sides like the embrace of some vast hostile entity. Her throat felt raw, and each breath was becoming a conscious effort. "Truth?" she gasped, pressing herself against a wall that was already too hot to touch comfortably. "Ya want to know what I think is true? I think you're scared, Lynns. Scared of connections, scared of people. Scared of anything that might require ya to actually care about something other than your precious flames." The temperature spiked again, and this time there was nowhere to run. The fire came around both sides of the corridor like the arms of some monstrous embrace, converging on her position with mathematical precision. Harley closed her eyes, raised her mallet, and the sprinkler system finally activated. The water hit the superheated air with explosive force, creating a wall of steam so thick it was like being inside a cloud. The sudden temperature differential caused the windows to spider web with cracks, and somewhere in the building's bones metal began to pop and sing with thermal stress. Through the chaos, Harley heard Firefly cursing, the first genuinely human sound he'd made all night. She used the confusion to her advantage, charging through the steam with her mallet raised high, if she could just get close enough. But Lynns was no amateur. Even blinded by steam and disoriented by the sudden change in his carefully controlled environment, he was still dangerous. The flamethrower swept in wide arcs, turning the water vapor into superheated clouds that scalded anything they touched. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled, his voice losing its earlier composure. "Water only delays the inevitable. Everything burns, Quinn, everything." "Maybe," Harley said, emerging from the steam like an avenging angel in Harlequin colors, "but not today." Her mallet caught him in the solar plexus with enough force to lift him off his feet. The flamethrower went flying, its fuel line severed, adding its contents to the conflagration in a brilliant flower of destruction that painted the walls with liquid fire. Firefly hit the ground hard, his perfect composure finally cracking. For a moment he looked exactly like what he was beneath all the philosophy and fireproof fabric, a broken man with a compulsion he couldn't control, terrified of a world that wouldn't burn fast enough to suit his needs. "The building's coming down," Harley said, grabbing him by the front of his suit. "We need to move, now. Let it fall," he whispered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Let it all burn. It's beautiful," the tower groaned around them, its death song growing louder with each passing second. Through the broken windows, Harley could see the lights of Gotham spread out below like fallen stars, beautiful and distant and utterly unreachable. She could leave him, should leave him. Firefly had killed dozens of people over the years, turned families into statistics and homes into crime scenes. The world would be a safer place without Garfield Lynns and his terrible artistry. But as she looked down at his face, peaceful now, almost serene in its acceptance of destruction, she saw something else. A kind of terrible innocence, the expression of a child who had never learned that not everything needed to be broken to be beautiful. "Ah, hell," she muttered, and hoisted him over her shoulder in a fireman's carry. The next few minutes were a blur of smoke and falling debris, of stairwells that had become chimneys and elevators that had transformed into furnaces. Harley carried Firefly's unconscious form through a maze of destruction, her lungs burning, her vision blurring from heat and exhaustion. They made it to the 32nd floor before the building's spine finally snapped. The collapse came in slow motion, each floor pancaking into the one below it with the inevitability of gravity and the finality of death. But by then, Harley had found a window facing the adjacent building, close enough to jump if you were crazy enough to try. They hit the neighboring rooftop hard, rolling across gravel and tar paper in a tangle of limbs and singed fabric. Below them, Wayne Enterprises folded in on itself like a house of cards, sending up a pillar of fire and smoke that could be seen from miles away. Firefly stirred in her arms, his eyes focusing slowly on her soot-streaked face. "Why?" he whispered. Harley considered the question, watching the flames dance against the Gotham sky. In the distance she could hear sirens wailing. Fire trucks and ambulances and police cars, all the instruments of order rushing to impose meaning on chaos. "Because," she said finally, "maybe there's more than one way to transform things. Maybe sometimes you gotta save 'em before ya can change 'em." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. For just an instant she thought she saw the man he might have been before the fire took hold of his soul, before he decided that destruction was the only honest art. Then the moment passed, and he was Firefly again, unrepentant, unchanging, eternal in his devotion to beautiful annihilation. "This isn't over," he said as the sirens grew louder. "It never is," Harley replied, already planning her escape route. "But that's what makes it interesting." She left him there on the rooftop, unconscious again from smoke inhalation and exhaustion, ready to be collected by the authorities who would lock him away until his next inevitable escape. The cycle would continue: crime and punishment, destruction and reconstruction, fire and water locked in their eternal dance. But tonight, at least, she had chosen to save rather than destroy. In a world full of people trying to burn it all down, maybe that was transformation enough. As she vanished into the Gotham night, the tower's skeleton continued to burn behind her, a monument to obsession and a reminder that even the most carefully constructed facades could crumble in an instant. But the city itself endured, as it always had, as it always would, rising from its own ashes like the mythical phoenix, beautiful and terrible and eternally, stubbornly alive.